So it's finally here, 5 years in the making, and now we have Zack Snyders Justice League. I managed to sit through all 4 hours in one sitting, and I can honestly say I thoroughly enjoyed this film. Now this video isn't going to be a spoiler-filled video, it's just mostly me sitting here just talking about my general thoughts of the film. I will be doing a more spoiler-filled, in-depth review of the film on my podcast, What's the Topic? My podcast releases every Tuesday, and I'll leave a link in the description of where you can find the podcast. But for now, let's just talk about my general thoughts of Zack Snyders Justice League. It's no secret I've never been a massive fan of Zack Snyder's DCEU films. Recently I watched through every single DCEU Zack Snyder film. I even watched the original Justice League, and I know that doesn't count as a Zack Snyder film, but Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman I found were very flawed films, and there were massive issues that needed to be addressed if the DCEU was going to get off the ground. There were some good aspects about Zack Snyder's DCEU films, but overall, I don't think they were very good. However, Zack Snyder's Justice League, for me, is an answer to some of his critics of his previous films. There is an injection of humour which I think was needed for these films. When you're dealing with superhero characters who are out of this world, having them in dark, gritty environments doesn't really mesh, and there does need to be a small injection of humour. There wasn't much in Zack Snyder's Justice League, but the jokes were good, and there was definitely far more jokes in this compared to his two previous DC films. And what I did appreciate is the jokes were actually good. I found the Flash to be a very annoying character in the original Justice League. He wasn't funny, and he was just quite annoying. In this, he's still kind of the same character, that he is the comic relief, but his jokes are pretty good and they're not hitting you over the head with these jokes. So I did really enjoy that aspect of Zack Snyder's Justice League, that the humour is pretty good and it doesn't feel out of place and it feels very organic. I would say, with this film being 4 hours long, it is in desperate need of an edit. I don't really want to criticise this film because it was made for the fans, and I appreciate Snyder just said, do you know what, fuck it. All these fans have lobbied to get this film released, and I'm just going to give them everything. I'm going to give them basically everything I shot. You do feel the runtime at some points, and throughout the film I was saying little bits and pieces that could probably be left on the cutting room floor, but to me, I didn't really care. I just wanted to sit back and enjoy everything Zack Snyder had to offer with this film. I personally would be very interested in a theatrical version of this film. I think it would be really interesting to see someone edit this 4 hour behemoth down to a 2.5, 3 hour theatrical version. Something that would have probably played in cinemas. Because I can't imagine if Zack Snyder ever stayed on the Justice League project, he would release this as the theatrical version, and he definitely would have had to edit it down. But for me, I'm just so happy Snyder got to tell his story. He seems like a really nice guy. After the interviews I've watched of him, he just seems very happy he's able to tell his story and his vision. The film definitely has its problems, but it is a significant improvement on the 2017 version. Characters are given motivation and depth, the action scenes look so much better, the framing is just far superior to the Justice League of 2017. One of the biggest improvements for me was the character of Steppenwolf, who in Justice League 2017 was just a really bland, uninteresting villain. And he also looked like a PlayStation cutscene character. In Zack Snyder's Justice League, I still don't love the look of the character, but I do appreciate the added layers and depth Zack Snyder had put in for Steppenwolf. You feel like he is somewhat of a tragic character compared to the mindless bad guy from the 2017 version. Steppenwolf has an aim, he wants to get back in Darkseid's good books, and it's interesting to see him, and although you're not rooting for Steppenwolf, you do kind of feel sorry for him, and it adds some more layers to this character, which I really appreciate. It's been said a lot by people that Cyborg is the heart of this film and he probably benefits the most from Zack Snyder's cut. And that is definitely true. I don't want to get too much into him because I think people have said everything there is to be said about the character, but I really enjoyed Ray Fisher in this film. I think the character of Cyborg was handled so much better compared to Justice League 2017. The character has so much more to do and you really feel for him. and he definitely is the heart of the film, and I would say he's probably nearly the main character. Batman is probably the main, but Cyborg's story is the one we are supposed to relate to, and we're supposed to connect with that character. And for me, he was probably my favourite part of the film. I do truly believe Snyder probably acknowledged the problems he had from Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, and where some of those problems lie in those films, and he has addressed them in Zack Snyders Justice League. Overall, the film seems a lot brighter, a lot lighter, and obviously there was the added inclusion of some humour. And I think those aspects were things that really dogged Batman vs Superman Man of Steel. Everything was so dark and gritty, and there was no humour or lightheartedness. There was no sense of hope. And Zack Snyder's Justice League does have those elements. It has very good humour, which is very odd for a Zack Snyder film, because I've never really watched Zack Snyder film and laughed. He hasn't made films that have humour, but this had some really good jokes in it. And I know Zack Snyder did actually rewrite this film at the very start of the project, because obviously the studio didn't like Batman vs Superman and felt DC needed to go to more of a Marvel-esque filmmaking style. And whilst I don't agree with that, I do think Snyder has benefited from the studio actually telling him to add a little bit of humour. And I think it does show that, you know, filmmaking is a collaborative project, and it does help to have someone in your ear to say, well, maybe you should add some elements. And I do think Zack Snyder's Justice League benefits massively from that. It feels like a film that shows Zack Snyder is growing as a superhero filmmaker, as a DCEU storyteller, and he is acknowledging some of his past mistakes in the previous films and building on them, which I really appreciate. He doubled down with Batman vs Superman and decided he would definitely go for his original vision and make it as dark, as gritty as possible, and it seems like this, he has gone, perhaps elements of that didn't work, so let's just try and lighten it up a little bit. And I think it works to its advantage. Ben Affleck actually is good in this film. I highly criticised him in Justice League 2017 because he just looked uninterested, and I know he was dealing with his own personal issues, but he was a major drag on that film. He looked like he would rather be anywhere else than on the set of Justice League. And in Zack Snyder's film, he is fantastic. He is growing as a character, and this Batman is definitely the Batman from Batman vs Superman, and he is really growing as a character, which is something we can all appreciate and enjoy. And it's such a shame we probably won't see any more of this and see that character develop, because I do think Zack Snyder had a definitive vision of where that character was going to go, and we were going to see a true arc for Batman. I believe Snyder has said by the end of his trilogy he would have died and someone new would have took on the Batman cowl, which would have been really cool to see, to be honest. And it could have been like a mini reboot for the DCEU. You start with an older Batman who then hands down the cape, and then you restart the story from there. A major part of this film I love was the score. The score is fantastic by Junkie XL. I think that's something I did really love about Batman vs Superman and Man of Steel, was the score and soundtrack are just beautiful, and they always are in Zack Snyder films, and this film is no exception. There were some parts of the score I didn't really like, especially in Wonder Woman's action scene in London. I didn't like the start of that, but then when it went into her theme song, I really did enjoy it. I have seen some people say that this is the best DCEU film, and even maybe even the best Warner Brothers film ever made. For me, that's not true. Is it the best Zack Snyder DCEU film? Yes. Is it the best DCEU film? Probably not, but it is definitely one of the better DCEU films. I think the film does have its issues, but a film like this will never really get made again. Something that is such a passion project and made specifically for fans. This is tailored for fans, people who love comic books, who love these characters. This isn't made for general audience consumption. You know, this 4-hour film would not get released in theatres because it just wouldn't do well. And this is just a true love letter to fans. So it feels wrong to really criticise the film. It definitely has its issues. There are problems I have with the film, and that's okay because all films have problems. But it doesn't feel right to criticise this when it's such a love letter to fans, and you can really feel the heart and soul went into this for Zack Snyder. So it's kind of, why would you criticise it? It's something that's made specifically for people like me, so sit back and enjoy it. So those are my thoughts on Zack Snyders Justice League. A 4-hour film which I really enjoyed. I haven't enjoyed many of Zack Snyder's DC films, but this one was the exception. I think he has learned as a filmmaker and what works and what doesn't, and has addressed the issues that were in the previous films. But as I said, I'll be doing a more spoiler-filled, more in-depth discussion on my podcast, What's the Topic? You can listen to it in some links I'll put in the description, and there's Twitters and whatnot. Just, click links, follow, and get ready for the podcast on Tuesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.